on this day, the 18th of November. This is an unusual one. We have two events happening on the same day, different years. And these years are 1300 years apart. It's quite a bit of time. But the first one is the year 326 AD. The second is 1626. And the event, strangely as it sounds, is the same event, 1300 years apart. On this day, the 18th of November, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is consecrated. The first time it was consecrated was way back in Roman times. It had taken 40 years to build and had been initiated by Constantine the Great. The second time, St. Peter's was consecrated by a different pope in a different time in a different political situation, one in which Rome had disappeared from the earth. So, let's talk about St. Peter's Basilica. So, Constantine, between 1318 and 1322, construction began. And this church, at first, wasn't the most important church going, but it became important, a place of pilgrimage, because it is said that St. Peter was martyred here on the Vatican Hill many years ago. Originally, the Circus of Nero stood on or near the site. We know exactly, but very near. And it was here that many Christians were thrown to the lions and martyred in different sorts of gruesome ways. In this church, this basilica, Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. The Saracens sacked the basilica just 46 years later. Because the St. Peter's was outside the walls of Rome, they were able to easily plunder the place, and apparently it was filled to overflowing with rich liturgical vessels, jeweled reliquaries, and holy relics. St. Peter's tomb was smashed by them, and in response, Pope Leo IV built the Leonine Wall, that is the wall on the other side of the river Tiber, the medieval part. And over the years, this great basilica began to fall into disuse and into ruin even. When this church was split and the Pope went to Avignon, or one of the popes went to Avignon, Rome was ignored and very nearly became extinct as a city. Luckily for Rome, the Pope returned after the split, and here he saw the state of St. Peter's Basilica and initially wanted to rebuild it. The idea of tearing down something which was 1300 years old, one of the most sacred Christian sites in the world, was anathema to many. But they looked at the state of it and they realized it wasn't structurally sound. A 1300-year-old building. Well, probably. It was built without the sorts of buttresses and strengthening architectural things that Gothic cathedrals had, or even more modern classical buildings had. The idea was they were thinking about putting a dome in, they're thinking about updating it, but just got to the point where it was probably easier just to tear it down and rebuild. Now, rebuilding was going to be very expensive. And part of the money that was going to be funding this was from the sale of indulgences. And we all know what happened with that. Unintended consequences. In an effort to rebuild one of the great basilicas of Christianity in a glorious new way, in a baroque, neoclassical style. You had all the famous guys there. You had painters, and Bernini did the outside, and Michelangelo designed the dome, and it's all amazing. But the sale of indulgences led to some trouble up north in Germany. A certain Martin Luther protested about the sale of indulgences and how this was contrary to Christian doctrine. Yes, building or rebuilding the great basilica of Constantine I ended up, indirectly, creating the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, everything else that came with it. And not long after, Charles V's Protestant army, mostly made up of Germans, although they were fighting for the Catholic Charles V, sacked Rome in an orgy of violence, looting, and murder. And so, unintended consequences. However, the new St. Peter's is now itself almost 400 years old, and it is a very fine building. I have been there myself and through the Vatican, and it is exquisite. It is really one of the wonders of the modern world. And when you're in Rome and when you got a good view, it dominates the city. The dome, the doors, everything about it is enormous. Many of the treasures and the decorative parts of the old St. Peter's were rescued, and they are a part now of the new one, as is the altar. The underground, the tombs, they are still there, and yes, it's one of the most amazing buildings going, but the story of its building and its rebuilding, well, it had a great effect on history down the ages. So, on this day, 18th of November, 326 AD, and 1626 AD, St. Peter's Basilica was consecrated. If you like these videos, come back for more tomorrow. Like, comment, and subscribe.